to the Goffstown School Board meeting. I call the meeting to order at 6. If you could just rise and say the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, do we have correspondence tonight?
We do not.
Okay. Commendations, good news? Anyone? Okay. Public comment. No public comment tonight? All right. Moving on, we're going to approve just the public hearing minutes from last Monday and the school board meeting because the budget previews are long, so we'll get them either Wednesday or next week. So did everybody have a chance to read them? Anyone see anything? If everything is good, I can take a motion.
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
All right, by Jarrett, and that's for both, right? The public hearing and the school board?
Correct.
Okay, do I have a second? Who's second? Caroline? All right, any further discussion? Yes, Shane?
I wasn't present, so I'll be abstaining.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Shane. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and then we have one abstention. All right, so moving on to committee reports. Scott, financial?
Sure. We
stuff?
A&F typically meets before school board meetings, but because this meeting started at 6, we didn't do that. I had sent out the financials on Friday to A&F. So I'm going to, if it's okay, I will just go over it. Tonight's manifest totals $2,723,193.75, of which your payroll, taxes, and benefits are a little over $1.921 million. Special ed activity is North Star Education. It's an out-of-district, and this is a semi-annual billing, so this is one of two. Lighthouse School, which is for October, a little over $12,600. Johnson ABA, this is your contracted services for behavioral support, a little over, almost $11,300. And then it's the typical ones that you see. Blazer work is predominantly speech. Literacy learning was October. The next one, N2Y, that is special education, instructional software licenses. And I sent the A&F committee the definition of dialectical behavior training. That is funded through an ESSER grant. And essentially, we are training our staff. This is one of two payments. We're going to be training our staff, and it's really how they try to deal with students who are dysregulated and trying to teach them a way to kind of calm down and do that. So this was part of your ESSER grant. General expenses, this month, you'll note you have your October assessment, over $167,000. DL King, a little over $110,000, and that's our final payment for the Windows project for the general contractor. I'm expecting one more bill from the architect for a small amount, like $2,400, I think, and then that project will be closed out. Connection Financial, that's laptops. Let's see, Sousa Signs, that is the LED light, and there'll be one more payment forthcoming for about $8,000, and you'll see that on your next manifest. Also note that the Goffstown High School prior classes donated money towards that project as well. Bluen Service is one that you don't see that often, but they are the HVAC contractor that we are now using. In case some of you don't know, we had an HVAC like maintenance type person. That person resigned. We're still looking for that individual, but Bluen has been performing those maintenance and repairs at our schools for the time being. SGS Turf Care, that is turf care at both at the high school and at Mountain View. We did, in light of the project, we've stopped doing stuff at the game field because it doesn't make sense. They're playing their last few games in the next few weeks, and we're not fertilizing a field that is going to be ripped up. BMO, Harris Bank, mostly facilities, safety materials. I'm not sure if you have noticed, but there are numbers on the windows at our schools. They are reflective. Not all of that was for that, but it was it was well over half of that was for all so police and fire can identify inside and outside of a room from the outside, so it's part of our planning. And what else do we have? Gov Connections, more licenses. Pelmac is alarm system maintenance and repairs, and Staples was paper and school supplies. Food service, you'll recall that we did do some replacement of equipment from last year. You voted for that. And then that was finally done, and that was at Mountain View and at the high school. And then performance food is just simply your food and your commodities over the last few weeks. So overall, there was a lot of activity on the AP side of things.
Anybody have any questions for Scott? Everybody good? All right. Do you have any questions for Scott?
Nope, but I have a motion.
All right, go ahead, Dan.
I'd like to make a motion, we approve the total manifest in the amount of $2,723,193.75.
Thank you, Dan. Do I have a second? Second. By Ginny. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining? Okay, we're unanimous.
So there's one more thing that's not on your agenda per se, but I wanted to try to bring it up, and that is, I mentioned at prior school board meetings that you're going to be receiving a check from the New Hampshire retirement system. There's a memo that is in your packet. So essentially, there was legislation that passed both houses, House and Senate, and then the governor signed it, and it was a one-time amount that's going to be credited for both municipalities and for school districts for Group 1, which is police, fire, and teachers only. And just a couple of things that I wanted to mention there. Ironically, we met with the state last Friday at a NASBO meeting, and the state does not know how much this check will be. They're still, kind of figuring that out. They said it was extremely cumbersome legislation to try to execute on. But the way that they believe that it's going to be done is, in this case, SAU 19 will be getting essentially, they're not even sure if it's one check or 3 checks. If it's one check, they're going to give us some sort of backup saying what each entity will be getting, or there'll be 3 checks. They're still not sure. But the legislation's intent, from my reading of it, is for it to go towards fund balance, not to be spent. So I wanted to let you know that our tax rate will probably be set within the next 2 to 3 weeks in Goffstown. And it's highly unlikely, nor would I recommend that you would apply that refund to this year's tax rate anyway. So I wanted the board to at least acknowledge, and I put a motion on there so that when this check does come in, whatever those funds are, they'll be deposited as upon receipt, and that they'll go towards the fund balance, for FY23.
So just to be clear, that would allow us to receive a little bit of unexpected property tax relief for next year.
Yep.
So at this point, we think that we could split it. We could choose which fiscal year we would accept this in. It makes more sense to us from our perspective.
Yeah, way more sense to do it next year.
To take this next December, not this December. So that's essentially what we're talking about.
Yep.
Go ahead, Jared.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the person that's probably going to answer this. But if we receive this unanticipated revenue, this is going to go in our unreserved fund balance to then be decided at the end of the year what to use for it, or is it going to be in another part
Negative.
of unreserved fund balance?
Negative. Unanticipated revenue gets put back to the taxpayers because unless we have a hearing to accept and expend it, then we can't use revenue as an appropriation because we already have our appropriation gross. The only way to do it is you bring it in as revenue, unanticipated, or you bring it in as a negative expense. But this is not eligible to be brought in as a negative expense because it's not a refund from the people we paid it to. It's unanticipated revenue. So we don't do anything It goes back to the taxpayers.
Would this fall under any part of our unreserved fund balance
Yes.
or not?
Yes.
It does.
It
It goes
does.
into the unreserved fund balance, but you can't use it to buy anything because there's no appropriation.
Yeah,
Okay, so,
and our issue with this is, we don't have a some certain amount. We don't know how much it's going to be. We don't know when we're gonna get it.
Right.
So from our perspective, it makes all the sense in the world. Let's just be clear with the public that we're planning to use this for tax relief next December.
and that was the intent of the legislature from my reading of the statute. We had I gotten a legal opinion on this particular one because the New Hampshire Municipal Association had an opinion that said you could accept and expend it. When talking with the DRA, they didn't want to touch us with a 10-foot pole in terms of any advice. They said, contact your local council, spoke to local council, who emailed me back saying, I recommend that you accept it, but it just goes to offset taxes for the following year. So that's my recommendation.
So you would want this motion tonight? If
Yeah.
Everybody's good with
This way
that?
it's clear that, what the intent of the board is.
Okay. Does anybody have any further questions or comments on this? All right, so Scott wrote the motion on the bottom, if anybody wants to read it. Go ahead, Rheta.
I motion to authorize the business administrator to deposit 7.5% of the NHRS contribution check once received by the district as unanticipated revenue and apply it to the FY23 fund balance.
All right, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Caroline. I saw Carol, or heard her first. Sorry, Shane.
That's fine.
All right, any further discussion?
Just one comment,
Yeah.
just for the record.
Yeah.
It's a moot motion. It's a motion for the public to understand that's our intent,
Right,
but it really doesn't do
I
anything.
understand.
Agreed, and
Yeah.
absent taking any action, it would automatically be part of
would do the same thing.
It
Yes.
would-
We
it
don't
would
have a
accomplish
choice.
the same thing. We agree, but we thought that this
This
was,
makes it clear.
this was
I just
just better
wanna-
And
transparency.
also for the
redundant
record, if
and
we're
make it
not
clear.
for tax rate setting coming up potentially in a week or two, we'll probably get the check afterwards, but if it were, I didn't want to be having to make that sole
When did the
decision on my own.
legislation become effective?
Oh, it was a while ago.
It was July.
July 1st?
Yeah.
And so the I know the intent because I was following it anyway. But the legislature probably had something in mind about how fast the department was going to be able to react and cut those checks.
Or lack thereof.
And at this point, we can't, and tax rate setting is supposed to be September, not October, if you look at the law. And so it has to be the next year because we can't put it in the current tax calculation because we don't physically have it in the bank.
We don't even know the amount.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, and so, but even if we knew the amount, we couldn't because it'd be part of the anticipation kind of thing and that would be irresponsible. You gotta get the money in the bank.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. Oh, go ahead, Ginny.
Oh, this is like a wonderful measure to have this money to go in, to come back for tax relief, but this doesn't really in any way help school funding.
No.
Am I right?
This fixes
Yeah.
nothing long-term. This is a one-year, one-time, minor little Band-Aid fix. And again, I would echo your sentiment that we appreciate any money we receive, but this long-term makes no difference.
It doesn't help school
No.
funding, but it's nice to have,
We'll-
wonderful to have tax relief.
We'll take it.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, so I have a motion, I have a second, we've had good discussion. I'm gonna call a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. Thank you, Scott.
And then I had one other just informational
Okay.
for the board and for the community. I learned recently, again, I go to these association meetings, I'm glad I do because I learn a ton. And Laura and I went to a meeting and we learned that the 5% contingency fund, which this board has adopted, both Goffstown and New Boston, each school district is allowed to determine what they want to put into that set aside in that reserve fund up until the tax rate setting, not July 30th of the fiscal year. So we were led to believe that we had to make that decision on July 30th, and prior to July 30th of each year. The DRA and our legal counsel said, no, you can do it until the day you set the tax rate. Now granted, it impacts when you sign that MS-24 in terms of how much you're going to retain and how much you're going to go towards, offsetting taxes. You had only like $200,000 more than what I had projected, a pretty small amount, so I'm not recommending that you make any changes. But had you had a more robust one and you didn't fully fund your contingency fund, I would probably come back to you and make a recommendation contrary to that, to put more money in, to stabilize tax rates and for future potential issues, so.
Yeah, this one was news to me as well.
Brand new,
When
yeah.
Scott shared that with me, I'd never heard, and particularly when we do our audits in the summer, I said to Scott, we can make a decision after the audit's closed. I mean,
Yeah.
this was news to me.
Yeah, so I still think part of our policy is that we do make that decision prior to June 30th. That's fine, we can still do that, but then you do have another quote-unquote bite at that apple after the audit is done. So that's really favorable news, in my opinion, so just wanted to share that with you. That's it.
All right, thank you, Scott. All right, Budget Committee.
There is a meeting tomorrow at 6 o'clock right here in this room. And I say this for the public because there are 2 openings on the Budget Committee board, or Budget Committee. They've only received to date 1 application for the Budget Committee. So if there are any members of the community that would like to give back to their community, please send your resume to Town Hall and potentially sit on the Budget Committee, especially over the next couple weeks. It's going to be very fun. Other than that, right after they select or review that application, they will be starting joint meetings with the town. So like they did for the school board, they will be reviewing the town overview of the budgets that are coming up. So again, starts at 6. Right after the resume review, they'll be starting their joint meetings with the town.
All right, perfect, thank you, Jared. All right, Goffstown High School Field Renovation Committee. Ellen's not here, is that?
Yeah, so we have
on that?
been meeting quite a bit. I will share with you that the engineer is preparing plans. We have kind of worked out in terms of what the scope is. So as I mentioned before, when we initially started this whole idea, we thought we'd be able to do field, lighting, bleachers, press box. Based upon cost increases, we're going to be doing field, lighting. We're going to pave around in front of the bleachers. We're going to be putting up a press box, but the bleacher addition itself was over $200,000, and we need contingency funds, so we're going to hold off, on that. We're also holding off on any type of, I know people have asked, are you going to be doing any type of concessions, bathrooms, et cetera, and that is also, we're holding off on that. So the plans will include a footprint of where we think things will go, and all of the utilities, et cetera. So that's the other thing too, we're putting utilities everywhere in terms of water, electricity, data lines, you name it. But what we hope, and I sent Heather a note, is that we're hoping that we're going to be on the planning board agenda on November 17th, which is a Thursday at 7 o'clock. And we're also going to be holding a listening session for neighbors. So those letters will go out probably tomorrow, if not Wednesday, and that'll be on November 10th here. So we'll invite, I think we have 16 to 20 abutters. So we'll invite them, and if everybody, it's a public meeting, anybody can attend. And the architect and the engineer will go over all of the plans, at that time. So it's moving along quite well. Next week, I have a meeting with the very generous donor and the school district's legal counsel to draft up all that paperwork. So it's moving ahead nicely. It's public information, so I'll share it with you. The New Boston School Board voted last week to contribute $100,000 of ESSER funds towards the project as well. So it's great that there's a lot of community support. A few people have asked me, can we donate to this project? Not quite there yet. I think once I meet with the attorney, looks like we'll be setting up what's called an expendable trust fund at that particular time. If folks want to make donations towards this project, they'll be able to do that. But yeah, it's pretty exciting, and it's moving ahead rather quickly. Shane asked me prior to the meeting, when do they expect to do any work? Well, we have to have the final approval from the Department of Ed, and what that requires is the superintendent has to sign off on, 8 pages of attestations, basically. We have to have the final plans from the engineer, and then once that happens, then we can execute the contracts. But until then, we can't really break any ground until those contracts are executed. And but it's moving ahead quick.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. All right, moving on. SAU policy meeting, we're hoping to have one in November. We're still working on dates. We'll get back to you with that. SAU 19 budget hearing and board meeting is set for December 14th at 6 o'clock at the SAU. So let either Denise or myself know, or Bill know, actually, if you cannot attend. And then we have Superintendent Report.
Thank you. Just a few quick things this evening. I wanted to let the board know that the New Hampshire Education Department just released the state assessment data today to the general public. So that has gone out. We've had a couple of challenges getting Mrs. Kohler access to that data. I think we might have resolved that today. So we're in the process of beginning our own process of reviewing our data and taking a look at some of the trends and projections that we see. Some sad news. Some of you may remember Diane Clapp, who was a principal secretary at Maple Ave Elementary School. She passed away. And I just wanted to recognize that she was employed with us from 1971 until 2004. So I wanted to recognize her many years of service.
It's an awesome lady.
Yeah, and Mrs. Pishka just talked about how she was just such a happy, positive contribution to the Maple Ave faculty. So our condolences go out to her family. Wanted to let the board know, the board may recall last year we had an issue with some students gaining access to some Wi-Fi equipment here. We have another round of that on a much smaller scale. And the reason I share this is you've heard, and we have included in our capital improvements plan, about a $300,000 Wi-Fi density upgrade project that we are looking to do. There are elements of that that Mr. Bourget is reviewing right now that would increase our security now. So there may be more conversations to come about that. The Wi-Fi units, and I could point one out if I see one in here, they're about $1,000 a piece. So when you see those units that are, and we have 250 of them, so $1,000 a piece, you can see that very quickly you get into a very expensive project. But we do have some concerns about that, so I wanted the board to be aware. A little bit of good news, I think. We've talked about the Italy trip for a while at this board. I wanted to see if the board was open to the idea that we have 2 teachers that are interested in chaperoning the trip. You have already approved this, and I would ask if the board would be open to a slight amendment if the itinerary included a stop off in Paris as well as Italy for people who may be interested. I think that's where we're at. So unless there's an objection, you've already approved this trip, let me know. But we're trying to salvage this because there was a group of kids that really wanted to go. So I think at this point it looks like it still may be a very solid possibility. So
Awesome.
I wanted to give you that update as well.
So, Dan has his hand up.
Does it extend the trip, beginning or end?
I don't believe so, Dan. That would be a good thing to know. So if they were doing 7 days and then they added 3 or 4 more, and now kids are missing a half a week of school, I might have an issue with that. And I haven't even seen the kind of proposed dates or itinerary or anything, but I just conceptually wanted to make sure the board was aware that this may still be, we're trying to hold out hope for this trip for these kids.
Yeah,
So,
that would be nice.
and that was all I had tonight.
That's it? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Brian? Nope. All right, moving on. Old business. We have first read policies, questions, and answers. If anybody had any questions on any of the policies, Denise sent them out. We had one board member had some recommendations, so we highlighted those. Did anybody have anything on anything? Nope. So they'll come back in November for second read with motions. We're not doing it next week.
No, but if we have questions, we can take it up at the next,
Or
the first
if you
meeting.
have
and-
now, because we already did first read.
Yeah.
Do you have questions now?
We did first read?
Yeah, tonight's questions and answers.
Oh, never mind.
If you have anything, you can ask now or
I
email.
don't know if I have any.
Okay, well, email if you do.
That's an admission that I haven't looked at them.
Yes, I figured as much.
And renewed it again.
All right, thanks, Dan.
I'm only on a committee.
Yes, I know. I think you missed that meeting.
That's possible.
So if you have any questions, let me know.
Okay.
All right, moving on to mission and vision statement. So you guys should have a copy, Greta?
Yes. So again, just to recap a little bit, we've been working on this for about a year, looking at different versions. And these were, this particular section on the school board mission, and there is no vision, just to be clear. There wasn't in the original, and I figured let's just start with what we already had, which were the mission and guiding principles. So if we want to consider a vision, we can take that up at our retreat next year. So I did get feedback, and I hope this, I was trying to make this as straightforward as possible. I wanted you to see all of the feedback that came in. What is there, and they're all in text boxes, so what's there is the recommended draft above the feedback is what we're proposing to move forward. And I did add a definition of the guiding principles, so it's clear we're guided by our policies. There's not, this statement here isn't telling us how we do our work, because the policies will do that. But the principles are more like their values or principles in it, and it describes our beliefs about the work that we do. So, as I mentioned before, we look at this we are supposed to be looking at this every year at the board retreat. This would just hold until June of next year. So I guess I just want to open it up for comment or feedback on the final draft. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Just one thing that I'm looking at, my feedback, I eliminated 3 of them. It's not clear in the response, and I may not have made it clear when I wrote it to you, that that's exactly what my intention was.
Okay.
And so when you look here, and I'll just say it, the blue stuff, if you don't see a blue comment, it's because I didn't think that particular item was important enough to actually list.
Okay. So that was not clear to me, so
I understand that now when I'm reviewing the material.
And can I just ask you a question, because you
Yes.
didn't make a comment on the mission. Are you saying that you don't think we need the mission?
I think did I not make one?
And I think that's where I began my assumption. I figured if you didn't say anything, you didn't have any additional comments, so.
I'm looking at the 2, which means the mission may have been, okay, the mission of the Goffstown School Board is to define and communicate the broad educational goals, standards, policies of the district, to require appropriate assessment to ensure that those goals, standards, and, oh yeah, it changes. Those goals, standards, and policies are met and adhered to, and to seek the necessary financial support. There are a couple of words that changed.
Okay, so the text box include the original and recommendations. If you look up above that,
Yep.
right under the title, School Board Mission, it says the mission of the Goffstown School Board is to establish and uphold the broad educational goals, resources, and policies that ensure a quality education in the Goffstown School District.
Is that the new recommended verbiage?
Yes. And so
Okay.
what you're saying,
No, I did send a recommendation that
Okay.
wasn't the red.
okay.
So if you're saying that's a new one, that looks okay to me. I mean,
And
it's shorter
it's-
and it meets more.
Right. And again, the mission, so the vision is where you want to be in the future. The mission is, this is what we do right now.
Right. The only word that I'm looking at is every time I found an adjective, I was trying to really look at it. So the word quality, I'm not sure I would go with that, because the Constitution and the law don't say quality. It says a public education.
Do you disagree that this school board, not the Constitution, is that part of our mission? So I just send that back to
As
you.
a mission statement, I wouldn't have it. As a principle, I would probably like to do it. I would like to get there. okay? I'm hesitant to put something in there that is not part of the original framework of what it would be. That's where I'm kind of struggling with.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm not sure it's our mission. I think it's a goal. It's not a mission.
And to that point, I appreciate it because Ellen had also added some things that really looked more like goals and objectives, and I didn't want.
I don't think that's part of the mission. I think
Yeah.
it's a goal.
Yeah.
I mean, our goal should be a quality education. Our goal should be the highest thing we could possibly do and allow for our students to be successful when they get out into the world, because the world is not the same as a school. And we need to prepare them for the world. That would be a goal.
So, I'm taking feedback right now, and what I heard from you is that you tried to eliminate adjectives, and in this particular case, you would be happier, you're okay with this, but you would be happier without the quality.
That would be correct.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jared.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize, Retta, because I thought, I know I had talked with somebody else to kind of craft this, and it looks like they didn't add it. One of the guiding principles that I looked at under number 1, they talk about education. Looking through this, the one thing that I think is missing is physical safety of our students. And I know that we have discipline in here, but I've always looked at this board, not only from an education purpose, but I've always looked at this board that our top priority is the physical safety of our students is paramount. And I just don't know where it should be reflected in here.
I thought that it was in here somewhere.
Again, I did read, when we talk about discipline and
It's
kind
number
of
6.
that work. See, and that's what I thought, is it was more disciplining individuals that don't have safe, but it's not just other students.
Read number 6.
I did read number 6.
Yeah, number 6 is
So are we talking about the red, the black, or the?
Oh, the very, right next to
The
Sam.
bullet.
What's
The bullet,
similar?
number 6.
Yeah, so, because I thought we were replacing that with what the red was.
No,
Okay.
so going, I just want to be clear, I
red was
tried so
original.
hard to make it clear. What's in the text box, the red is the original, and the underline was from commenter 1,
Okay.
and the blue is for commenter 2. But what's draft being
It's
proposed?
okay.
I thought it was one of these.
I just wanted to make sure I get the contribution.
Thank you.
So does number 6 cover your concern?
I look at that in conjunction with what we have for number 1, and again, me personally, I've always looked at this board as our top priority, has been the physical safety of our students, even over education.
Right.
Call me crazy.
No, you're right.
But, that's my expression about it.
So you would like to see that higher up?
Me personally, I believe it is, but again, we're a board here.
Yeah. And I will share, and I said this originally, that there were a couple, all of these existed before with the exception of the leadership that we value, high-quality leadership without the word high leadership, and, our commitment to being fiscally responsible. Those weren't in there. And I think safety, these are the 3 things we talk about every time.
Yeah.
So I'll just make a note of it.
Are you set? Dan?
Yeah,
has
this is
his
not
hand up.
easy, and I think my logic for actually removing this one was because I didn't want to choose a top priority. I don't like those words. The reason is, you can have the kids here, you can have them safety, but if you don't teach them, what are we doing? So the top priority, if you want to pick one, is the education within a safe environment. How do you, I can't make them, it's parallel. They're all top. There's not just one thing.
Right.
And so it's hard for me to say the top priority, because I don't think that's an accurate statement. We have to somehow, if you want that statement, merge them and say, a very high priority. The top is the top. You're not going to get any better, and then it starts this conversation.
Yep.
I don't think anybody's going to argue that they're both high,
Right.
but they might have a discussion whether they're top.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Shane.
this isn't kind of a discussion of which one's top or not, but I think we could say, amid all its responsibilities, the board must not lose sight of its top priority, the education of the students within a safe and welcoming school community or something like that, you know what I mean? I think we could add a little bit to that and make it encompass some of that safety thinking.
Yep.
Right.
That safety is really a big priority. Because obviously, if our students aren't safe, they cannot learn and receive a top-notch education. So,
Exactly.
but I think we
Yeah,
could
they
just,
definitely go
we could
hand in
fix that
hand.
up a little bit to kind of encompass more of that thinking.
To get all
For
that,
all of
yep.
that.
Go ahead, Caroline.
That was also going to be my suggestion, along with putting it in areas where it makes sense to continue to introduce that, like, it's a safe environment every time. So you don't want to do it every single one because it doesn't make sense in all of them, but any of them where it makes sense to incorporate the environment that they're in, you could just add in a safe environment.
Because I know you talked about that in number 7, non-threatening and respectful environment.
I do think the rest of number 6 is important to stand alone, though,
Yeah, and
because, yeah.
I had put it together because it's like, oh, this is a good, because
Yeah.
when you just start with, discipline, it's like, okay, well, that sounds, it's not negative, but
It
it's
can be.
because we want it to be
Yeah.
a safe environment.
Right.
Discipline is one way that we go about doing that.
Right.
I'll make a note of that, Carolyn. I'm not sure. I don't know if there's a specific one that you think it makes most sense in. We can take a look at that.
All right, so does anyone, because November 7th, it's going to come back.
Right.
And we're going to vote on it. So does anybody have, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I just want to look at number 8, and I want someone to help me understand how our mission within K through 12 has anything to do with lifelong learning. That's after they leave here. I'm not certain. Do we as a board think it's a great idea? Yes. Should it be part of the mission statement and things? I don't think so, because that's not our mission. It's to prepare them for a lifelong, to get there, but not there. Is there some way we can wrap that into saying, we value to prepare them for their lifelong learning, something like that?
Shane, do you want to
Yeah,
add to that?
I would just add that I think this is aimed at our teachers and staff more than our students. The way it says the educational community, because I know we constantly encourage staff, teachers, paraprofessionals to do more training, to be up to date on new techniques, new methods of instruction and things like that. So I think.
How would you word it so that it wouldn't be confusing to somebody like me?
Okay. I have to think about that, Dan.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I think the intent is that it's aimed
For
at
the
our,
staff.
yeah, our
Yeah.
staff more so. But I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah,
where it
I
could be
can see that.
confusing. Yep.
But don't you think, like, through the teaching and learning environment at our schools, that we should be doing it in a way that makes our students value lifelong learning? Like, get them really interested in always wanting to learn more?
Yep.
So that it does include the students as well? Because it doesn't you don't just start lifelong learning as an adult after you get out of school. You really have to kind of be interested in learning because you've enjoyed it in school, and in school you've learned the importance of continuing to learn things, be it whatever. Doesn't have to be academic learning, it can be whatever kind of learning. But I think that you have to teach that to kids while they're in school so that they can really appreciate it when they're out of school and continue it. So I do think it has a place
Yeah, no, I don't disagree at all.
in school.
But like Dan's saying, we just need to figure out how to
Reword
incorporate that
it,
into
Yeah.
make it clear.
Yeah. I mean, I think this applies to both. I just think the original intent was more aimed at staff.
Staff,
But I
right.
think, yeah, we should aim it at the whole school community.
And I want, because that caught my attention as well, and I just want to remind everyone, these are principles, these are values, what we value as a board, that help guide us when, like, we want to support
How about,
doing professional development and always, not just doing what we've always done for 30 years. We want everybody to be current and engaged.
in those words work, we value, why don't we put something like that? The board, it says values, encourages, not even, dial it back a little bit. Encourages students and staff to, come up with the words, guys, to assist them and to help them and to guide them into enjoying lifelong learning or something of that nature. I mean, that's our job. I mean, I think it really is, to try to teach them how to do that and how to enjoy it, because if you're not having a good time, you're
Right.
not
You're not
going to
gonna
want to do
continue.
anything
Right.
more.
I think a perfect example is our new PE courses that we're adding.
Oh, those are
The
gonna be-
walking and those
Yep.
teaching.
I want to take some of those courses.
I know.
just don't have
I
time.
know, they sound like fun.
And I'm wondering if we, instead of saying in the educational community, it could be lifelong learning for students, teachers, and staff.
Yeah.
Agreed.
All right, anything else? So if you think of anything, email Retta, but this will come back November 7th to be voted on. So you'll send out a new draft for everyone?
Yes, we will, but we'll be also meeting, PNC will be meeting on November 7th, so
Okay.
we'll send out a draft, but we may, the committee, when the committee gets together,
May tweak it.
tweak it
Okay.
a little bit, or I can send it out to the committee and they can get individual feedback on the next draft. But I think we're getting close.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. All right, we're going to do school staffing to get it done before we get into our budget review.
Okay, so everyone should have a copy of the staffing sheet. We have a couple of notifications. We have a leave of absence and a long-term substitute, so no action required on your part. For your approval, we're very pleased that Mrs. Stoyle has found a half-time interventionist for Glen Lake School. Leanne Barkus. I've not had the chance to meet her yet, but she is a 6-year teacher who has relocated to the area, has a young family, and is looking for a part-time job, and this sounds kind of perfect for her. Mrs. Kohler, anything to add on that particular candidate?
Yeah, Mrs. Brill was very excited, like you said, it's a recent move, and just the stars aligned, and she's very excited to have her on board.
Sweet,
So,
awesome. All
so
right,
we would be asking for your approval for that.
go ahead, Dan.
Can you help me and maybe the public define the interventionalist, please? I think I remember what it is to help the students.
Yeah, the short version of it would be that this is a certified teacher who would have the capacity to work with children who may have an IEP, may not have an IEP, it really doesn't matter, for kids who might need some extra help, some extra support, and this would primarily focus on early literacy and early math acquisition. And it's just the idea of having more hands to help promote literacy at a younger age. So this is consistent with what we have at both Maple Ave and at Bartlett. This is a new position for Glen Lake this year, but really focused probably more on literacy than math, but really helping any children who might need just that extra kind of dose of support.
Awesome, so I'll need a motion for this.
Move to approve?
All right, by Dan, do I have a second?
Second.
By Shane. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, okay, we're unanimous. And then the next one is
So the next
going
one,
non-public, right?
yeah. Well, let me do this in public and see to what extent,
Okay.
if I can sufficiently explain this, or if the board might have some additional questions.
Okay.
So we have a need for what we call an RBT position, which is a registered behavioral technician. This is somebody who has specialized training in the area of applied behavioral analysis, primarily supporting children who would be sort of on the autism spectrum. And this is a skill set that is beyond the scope of a typical paraprofessional. So we are looking for a non-union position, so this would fall within our category of student support specialists. We have a few others, such as our speech and language assistant. We have a vocational specialist. We have a couple of people who don't fit into one of our collective bargaining units. This position would too fall in that SSS category. And we have a number of open, vacant paraprofessional positions. So what we would recommend is a salary in the $20 to $22 an hour range. That's what we think would be an appropriate pay. And we currently have a number of para positions that are open that we would be able to swap out one position, and then it would probably require about an extra $10,000. But we right now have a number of vacancies for paras that we have not been able to support, and this is a need that we have right now. And in the absence of having our own dedicated employee for this purpose, we would be looking at a contracted service model, and they're getting around $60 an hour for this position. So if we were to buy this as a contracted service, it is more expensive, and then you have sort of the restrictions that go along with that. It's not technically your employee. You're buying a service. So what Mrs. McGrath and Dr. Dolph are recommending is to allow us to take one current vacant 8-hour paraprofessional position and to dedicate that money to create the new RBT position, and that if there's any additional need, depending on what the person that we might hire's experience level is, that we have a number of vacant positions right now that we have been unable to fulfill. So that's the short version. If there's any more explanation in non-public, we could do that as well.
Go ahead, Shane.
I'm not sure if this will fall under something that we should discuss in non-public, but now for a contracted service for this position, you said it'd be about $60 an hour, and we're going to offer about 20 to 22. You said. Are we confident we can get someone to fill this position at that rate?
Yeah, so Shane, I didn't get involved with the costing on this, so these are the numbers that Dr. Dolph thought would be sufficient. I would say if we're not able to fill it, it might need to go a little higher, in which case we would probably need to come back and let the board know at the time that we were nominating. So I think depending upon what the applicant pool may look like, this is a pretty specialized position, so the ability to find somebody for this could be a challenge. Much like, as Mr. Gross shared, that we have a vacant HVAC position. Not an easy one to fill, right? You've got to get somebody who has the right kind of education and the right kind of experience. And this person works very, very closely with our board-certified behavioral analyst, so there has to be a level of training, a level of expertise, and I would say we need the service. So whether we're able to do it at an employee rate or we need to do it at a contracted service rate, one way or another, we need to do this.
Right. Go ahead, Jared. I saw Jared's hand up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple questions on this one, Superintendent. Is this going to be, you're looking to repurpose for just this year or also going forward?
Yeah, good question. I probably should have clarified that. I would anticipate this moving forward.
Okay.
So once we would do this, we would basically, remove the position from one budget line, one category, and move it over. So you would see it as a repurposing of a position, but the net head count increase would not happen. It would be flat.
And with the 3S job category, this is a benefit eligible position as well.
This would be.
This isn't just $22 an hour per se.
Plus benefits.
This is plus benefits,
Correct.
which could, drastically go up, which is fine.
And
'cause that's what
again,
it is.
not knowing whether somebody would elect to take benefits, what package they would include, but correct. So when we budget for a para position, we budget for all associated benefits as well as the salary. So we would take that total package and apply it to this new position.
So the total compensation package could be anywhere from $45 to $50 an hour, which is still below the contracted rate.
Correct.
That we'd have, so.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jared. All right, Dan, and then Ginny. Go ahead, Dan.
Mr. Talbot asked my question.
All right,
Thank you.
perfect. Go ahead, Ginny.
I think this is a very important position. I think this helps not only the autism kid, but many others as well. My question is, if by some miracle you're able to hire all of the paras that you really need, would you still hire them?
If we could, we would.
Even though you're taking a para position here?
We wouldn't hire this one. So we would, for
Okay.
this, if the board approves this position,
Okay.
let's say we had an influx and there were a lot of
Right.
people looking for para positions, we would hire all of them except for one. We
Okay.
would leave one.
You wouldn't replace this
We
one?
wouldn't.
Okay.
We wouldn't. But I would also say, if I felt there was a need, if the principals felt strongly, or Dr. Dalla felt that there was a need, that we needed another para, we had a new student move in, or circumstances changed, I would come to you and I would make that request, as I have done many times over the years.
Okay.
Thank you, Jenny. All right, anyone else? Go ahead, Shane.
If we had to increase the pay rate, would that include eliminating another paraprofessional position? Or would we look at being creative to do that?
Yeah, I think at this point, we would look at, the possibility that this will definitely be one FTE, and then there's a possibility it may need to be a slice more, depending on what we need to do for benefit elections, for salary, et cetera.
And this may not be a problem, because we may not be able to hire paras anyway, so.
And we may not be able to hire this.
Right.
But, minimally, we want to try, and it's always our hope that we can hire our own personnel instead of hiring contracted services. That is our preferred model. We think that you get a better quality. I'd rather have somebody who's invested and wants to be part of our team.
I agree.
So if there's any more questions, we would need to go into non-public.
This would be a person that would be helping multiple students, right? So.
I
it would-
believe probably one or a couple of primary, but then this would be somebody who has knowledge and experience that could help other paras.
students
It
as
could
well.
help other teachers. This is somebody with a knowledge base that's kind of a specialized skill set.
So even though it sounds kind of expensive, it would be worth the money because.
Oh,
it
absolutely.
would
This is
help
good for
others,
kids.
right.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is kind of a no-brainer.
So you would need a motion tonight, unless there's more questions that we can do in non-public.
And I would say, we don't have anyone for this position, so this would be creating a position that we would then seek to recruit someone for, and then if and when we're able to find that person, we would bring that to your approval as a nomination. And then, at that time, if there were any other questions, we could certainly talk about that in greater depth.
Okay. So what does everybody think? If you're good with all the answers, we can do a motion.
I'll make a motion to repurpose a designated para position for the RBT position as presented under the parameters that have been provided by the superintendent.
Perfect. Thank you, Jared.
Second.
Ginny seconds. Any further discussion? You got that, Ginny second? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we are unanimous. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a field trip request. You have the
Okay.
information in your.
So here it is. After a long 2-year hiatus, the New Hampshire Association of Student Councils will be bringing back their annual fall conference. This is one that we have participated in for a really long time. The conference will be held this year. Once again, I think it was previously at Waterville Valley Resort and Conference Center. The dates are November 9th and 10th. So this is an overnight field trip that we would be asking for your support. The students will be provided with an opportunity to hear a national speaker, enjoy workshops, and share ideas with other state councils. And there is a pretty comprehensive agenda that goes along with this. So we would be asking for your approval. And at this point, we don't have a firm count on students, but we would be looking at somewhere around 8 to 10, 12, could be as many as 16. I think 16 would be the upper limit. There's an $80 per student cost, and we have one chaperone who would be attending.
Anybody have any questions? No, we can. Go
I'm
ahead,
looking
Dan.
for my calendar and I can't find it. What days are these?
Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah, I was just gonna say Wednesday, Thursday.
It's a Wednesday and a Thursday.
Thank you.
And if everybody's good with this, we can do a motion to approve it.
Yep, I'll motion to approve the Waterville Valley field trip request as presented in the request packet.
All right, thank you, Shane. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I think I saw Retta first. Sorry, Caroline.
Sorry, I was
So that
a
was
little
Retta
slow.
that seconded. All right, any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining? Okay, motion passed. Have fun.
Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to get into the budget review. Did everybody bring their packets?
So we should start with identifying which packet we're going to use. Scott,
Right.
which do you recommend? Actuals or notes?
We could do either or. I think we should go through the notes because it's self-explanatory. If you see, it says your answers right there in the notes.
So maybe we could just flip back and
Yeah,
forth
that's
as
kind of
needed.
what, like Jared and I, that's kind of what we do, is we have them both next
Gotta
to
use
each
both
other.
of them to know what our actuals are.
Yeah, fair
Right.
enough.
So, to start off, I wanted to share some not-so-great news, and that was that we did get our guaranteed maximum rate from Health Trust, and unfortunately, it went up quite a bit. We had budgeted at 6.5%, it came in at 11.5%. And the net difference to the default, again, so you can add about $234,345 to the bottom line. So I chose not to reprint everything for the sake of things, but it's just all in those health insurance lines. But that's something that we have to obviously contend with. And I think, Denise, you put that in there, right, the updated one they have?
I'm sorry?
The updated budget overview sheet, yeah, so you have that.
Yep.
So you'll see that that increased, obviously, the difference between the default budget and our current year's budget. That's up to 3.06% increase. And then with the $397,725 in new spending, the total between the proposed FY24 budget and the budget that we're working in right now is a little under 4%. It's 3.91% increase. So what we've done in the past is we've kind of gone through, page by page, and then you can certainly ask me any questions that you may have and kind of take it from there. It's also, I know, Jared, you're going to be missing some of these budget committee meetings, but it's helpful for the both of us as we just obviously take notes as we're doing it. So the one favor I would ask is that if you do have a question, please reference it by page number, and then there's a reference number all the way to the left-hand side. So we're going to use the notes as our guiding document.
Yep.
And this way, for the minutes, we know that if somebody has a question on page 1, line number 20, reference line number 20, then we'll know that's, dental insurance or something. All right?
All right. Sounds good. So does everybody know where we are? We'll start with page 1, budget with notes and actuals on the side.
So Scott, we'll start with the district.
Yep, we'll start on page 1.
Yep.
Oh,
Heather,
sorry,
just-
Jared, go
Yeah,
ahead.
just to make it easier, because I know that you're going to be looking at the budget, should we
Yeah.
just kind of ask questions as we go along
Yep.
instead of waiting? to be
Yeah, we're
going
going
on?
to do one page at a time.
Yeah, I know,
If you have
I know that you're going
questions.
to be looking at it too, and
Yep.
for you trying to look up and call people, it might be a little
Right.
difficult. But if we can focus on line 14 on page 1 of our comment section, this has to do with, I'm sorry, line 13 and 14, specifically 14. Looking at our actuals for retirement stipends and benefits, they have been significantly under our budget. No, they haven't?
No.
So 2021 actuals was 50,500, 2022 actuals was 12,000, and our budget right now is 115,500.
We budget based upon the notifications that we get from our teachers and support staff as to when they're going to retire. And we've also had situations where you've gotten a little late notice and you've agreed to accept them. So this time around, we budgeted quite a bit less simply because last year was kind of like a pretty big year for retirements. So, in that respect, I see what you're saying in terms of, with those actuals, but if you remember, we also split like, we split 22, if you remember, between 22 and 23. I can't explain why it was $12,000. I think it's because we moved everything. There were different parts of the budget. Remember when we moved everything into one line? One district line, before they were in different schools?
No, the reason why I asked this is, I'm getting into shell shock when the budget committee talked about substitutes, and our actuals didn't meet what our budget was,
Yeah.
and they cut our substitute line, which was completely opposite of what actually happened in reality the
Yeah.
following year. I just want to make sure that we're prepared to say, we're expecting to use $115,000 of potential
Yeah.
retirement stipends, and that we're, we can't give names or anything along those lines, but I want to make sure that we can say with great confidence that this is the number we need to cover the teachers and those individuals that have put so much work and life into this school, that we can cover this.
And those are known actual people.
Yeah.
This isn't a multi-year average that we're hypothesizing this is the actual amount.
So I just want to make sure that we're prepared to say, yes, we have these many retirements coming up that we're trying to prepare for, to get ready for that question that's going to come up.
Right. Go
So we
ahead.
should identify how many stipends that is.
Yeah, so what happened, it was in different lines. So when I look at that 2022 actual, you saw that it was only $12,000, right? That's because that was the only one in the district line, but we spent $25,000 at Maple Avenue, $13,000 for it was a special ed one, $66,500 at Mountain View Middle School, and $71,500. So they're in different parts of the budget, but when if you remember, we merged them all into one district line, so that was the year, just so you know.
No, and again, I understand this, but this is preparing us for
Yes,
the next
absolutely.
I
phase.
appreciate
All
that.
right, now, all right, go ahead, Retta.
As a follow-up, so we didn't expect some of these late retirees this past year. Is that something we need to plan for?
Not really. I mean, every once in a while, someone has a life circumstance where something happened. I know that I'm late. Kate usually talks to the union about it, that employee, and depending upon the it's part of being a good employer when you can do those certain things. If they've totally blown by the date and it's kind of, there's certain reasons, it's one thing, but we try to do the right thing for employees in that situation, because then they have to then wait yet another year.
And if I can add, we also don't add any other unknowns for an anticipated
Right,
one.
no,
So
these
let's
are
say
pure.
we don't add another, 10 or 15,000 to say, well, we usually have an extra, one or two that may come in, we budget just for the known ones.
And that was really my question. Will we, that money's going to have to come from somewhere if the retirement's approved, so.
Right.
I don't know how likely it is, but possible.
I would say it's probably very likely.
All right, everybody set with page 1? All right, moving on to page 2. Any questions, comments? Yeah, go ahead,
Just
Jerry.
looking at page 2, make sure I'm on the right page. Looking at general supplies,
What number?
is that, I know, I'm on the actuals, not the comments, so I've got to
Oh.
translate it over, I apologize.
Maybe you're looking at line 59?
43.
No, actually, it's on page 3 of the
Okay.
notes, so I'll wait.
Yeah, no, is everybody good with page 2? All right, we can move on to page 3.
Okay. So I just want to make sure for supplies need to protect, so this is line 57,
Okay,
I'm sorry, 58, I don't know why I keep
58.
looking up, of the $2,000, just because I don't see actuals in prior
It's
years.
new. It's brand new.
It's brand new?
Remember, that was put in the budget this year, brand new. Remember Steve said that he needed like tools and different things to do repairs, and there was like no line for it. So we added it this year. So you won't have any actuals.
No
It's a brand new
history.
line. There's no history.
Okay.
Are these consumable supplies, or are these,
Yes.
these are consumable
Yep, it's-
supplies?
yep.
So they're gonna need to be replenished every year?
Or every couple of years,
Yeah.
so if you might buy a small hand tool that they may last a year or two, but then eventually they'll need to buy one. But it's not like it's a more sophisticated piece of equipment.
All right, does anybody else have any questions on page 3? All right, moving on to page 4.
And I just wanted everybody to know that on line 86,
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
we have an increase there, but we need to do more. This is to help offset that E-rate share. We know we've got a lot more of rewiring to do and E-rate related projects, but we're responsible for 40% of the cost. So Steve is just recognizing the fact that whatever we do, we pay 40, they pay 60. And it's a lot of what Brian mentioned before about, now certainly, we're not going to be able to replace every single Wi-Fi access point, but E-rate pays for 40% of all of those things. So, and then the same thing with wiring and all that. So he recognized that we're going to do a little bit more next summer, and because of that, we need more for the E-rate portion.
All right, is everybody set with 4? We can go to 5.
And just for page 5, just for full disclosure, line 132 did increase the default on that one, simply because of increases in the provider costs. So I just wanted to be transparent on that. You'll see that later when I do the default numbers. We do that in a couple of weeks.
Just,
ahead,
which
Joe.
page are we on?
5.
5. Skipped ahead on me.
No, it's fine, we
If I
can
go
go.
back to 4 for a moment.
Oh, yeah.
Line 104. This looks like a salary pool for special ed. It's a new item that's on our budget. I just want to make sure that we can articulate, is this a salary pool for non-union members?
That is my understanding because, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe if we just put a note there listing non-union, just so that
Yep.
people understand what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Because we want to give raises to our non-union individuals as well.
Right.
And that's what the line would come from.
So I believe that's actually one individual who's in that SSS category that I mentioned earlier. But that would be a good note to add.
All right, so if everybody's good with 5, we can go on to page 6, if you're ready. I don't want to rush you, Jerry. And if you see something on page 5, we can just go back.
Yeah.
So if I may also, line
Yeah.
154, charter school, other professional contracted services. So the notes just, when you look at actuals, you'll see that they've been below that request, but Jennifer noted that we have 4 new charter school students, and we have to provide specialized services for those students, and they're at 4 different charter schools. So in the past, we haven't hit that mark, but she believes that we will next year based upon the new students that she has.
And I would just share, with respect to charter school students, there is often a very large inefficiency when we're providing special education services to charter schools, because we aren't going to send a person all the way to a school to provide a service. So we tend to buy contracted services. We try to partner with other districts, because you're buying just a small amount of services or support. But charter school students do end up having a larger cost associated with them because we have no economy of scale. And in the past, the board may recall, and I'll just share for new members, we have gotten to points in time where we had enough students that we actually looked at sending our own employee. So for example, if we're paying for multiple individualized services, it might be cheaper for us to hire a part-time teacher to go provide that service. So we do those things when the circumstances warrant them.
All right, is everybody good on page 6? We can move to page 7.
Again, just for disclosure, on line 164, I mentioned this during the presentation, but wanted to say it again, is that the state of New Hampshire gives a 5% lift or increase for all of these providers, the schools, and we have budgeted that in as default, all right?
Scott, if I can add, it might be helpful, I'm just thinking particularly when Mr. Talbot is sitting at the budget table on line 175, 2 ELL teachers, it might be good to add how many students, how many languages they're speaking, just to provide a little more context.
You got that, Wendy?
Happy to take that.
All right.
I did write it down.
Because I got no clue on that one.
I'll get it for you.
And let's be honest, teacher salaries, those are part of the collective bargaining agreement. We really can't adjust those other than getting rid of an employee.
Yeah, and really, this is just to show, these are the 2 FTEs that we have, but when you hear, 2 teachers, and then you say, geez, well, they're supporting, 25 kids who speak, 14 different languages, all of a sudden, 2 teachers doesn't sound that bad.
Right. All right, is everybody good on page 7? We can go to page 8.
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
can, just when we talk about teacher retirement, because we talked about retirement stipends, what's the difference between those?
So the retirement is what we pay to the New Hampshire retirement system, and that's based upon a percentage of their compensation, and I think it's around 19.6%, I think.
So that goes to their pension.
What?
That
That's
goes to their
pension, right. And then a stipend is it's negotiated from their CBA, and it's at the end of their career, and there's certain thresholds, whether it be 10, 15, 20 years, they get a certain amount as a stipend.
And Jared, we would also share that the employees pay a percentage as well.
Well, I think that, just kind of wrapping around my head, why do we have stipends in the district line, but we're paying, or I'm sorry, yeah, stipend in the district line, but we have the retirement salaries in the school line? So just understanding the difference why we do that.
Yeah.
You want me to explain that, or?
No, I'm ready for it.
What?
I know how to explain it.
You got that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else, page 8? All right, moving on to page 9. page 9. All right, we can move to page 10. Everybody good with page 10? Page 11? Do you need me to stop?
Let me find what page it's on.
Okay.
Yeah, this is gonna come up, line 288,
288? Oh, that's on page 11.
page 11, yeah.
Yep, okay. School board, yes.
I see it's being increased.
So the board took action to have a secretary, a recording secretary for curriculum and education and planning and communication, and policy committee meetings. Due to the nature of, those are lengthy, they require a lot more, there's more motions, a lot of discussion.
A lot of detail.
A lot of detail.
And
plus
historically.
Brian is really good at the P&C and I'm awesome at A&F, so we don't require that stipend, although maybe we should, but.
But Joe, she's pretty close to you.
Ooh, ooh.
I didn't say anything bad.
I guess my question is, if it's been approved by this board in this fiscal year, why is it considered new instead of?
It's not in the budget.
Right.
It's not in the current.
It's not in the current
Not in
budget.
the current budget. What we voted is in budget.
You voted on something that was not budgeted, which means I would have to do a transfer, which is fine, but it's not in the budget.
And Jared, I think the
So
big
what if
thing
you
is,
don't
these are
budget?
two complex committees with very important meetings, and we thought it was important, I think the board thought it was important to have a really good, accurate record for those meetings, and that's the nature of the increase.
And so our facilitator can be
Focus
fully
on-
functioning
Right.
in the
It's-
committee.
Right.
It's very hard to kind of run and help facilitate a meeting and also to record it.
It's just, we want to make sure, and it is called out this year versus prior years, that it's called out from the school board side.
Because it's new, yeah.
Yeah, so that was the other
Yep.
important piece.
And I
It's not
think
an
just to
increase.
share that
No,
the board thought
yeah.
this was important enough, and in fact, we thought it was important enough that we're doing it this year,
Right.
and we
Yeah, we started.
consequently budgeted for it for next year.
It's not our salary
All right, so are we good on page 11? We can move on to page 12. All right, if everybody's good with 12, we can go to 13. All right, moving on to 14. Everybody's good with 14? And go on to 15? All right. Everybody's good with 15? We can go down to 16?
So I wanted to point out that on line 411, we never really budgeted for district, our fleet maintenance, and it was in a wrong line. So that's like replacement tires, doing routine maintenance. Also, it's I'm not sure if it's quote-unquote maintenance, but we have typically 2 to 3 insurance claims a year on vehicles. And we have a $1,000 deductible that has to come from somewhere as well, so that's why that one was there.
Everybody good on 16?
Is that enough? Because I'm just looking at, maybe it's not that line, the one above it. I'm looking at our actuals.
For grounds maintenance?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm
I tried
looking
to
at our
split 'em up.
actuals, and they've been pretty high the past number of years, so
That's the number Randy and Dawn gave me, so, I gotta trust them on that.
okay.
I think in fairness to Randy as well, Randy often recommends increasing lines because of his historical actual spending, and by the time we get to making hard decisions about budgets, those are often cuts that we end up making.
Well, I'm just, yeah, so I'm looking at the line. I mean, we spent on grounds maintenance, you know, we budgeted $2,680 in the 2022 budget. We spent over $6,000. We increased the budget to $3,000, and we spent over $6,000. We kept the budget the same at $3,000, and we spent close to $11,000. And we're not increasing that line at all.
So would that have had anything to do with the arrangement we had with Parks and Rec for the new piece of equipment for lining fields?
Unlikely. It could have just been like a one-off or something like that, so he felt he didn't have to, we overspent the line doing a one-off, so I have to trust him when he gives me his figures, so I can go back and ask, but,
I just, it's one of those situations where we're consistently overspending the budget.
Yeah.
Are we gonna bring the budget to match our actuals, like vice versa?
And you'll
But-
see this in other facilities lines. You'll see that our
Keep it-
actuals are way over in some of the lines. And some of them, we've chosen to leave
please
them
note
flat.
please note though that, in that particular line, Jared, I split it into two, so you'll see that, one of them is grounds maintenance, $3,180, the other one is vehicle maintenance, $3,400, so it's, you know, let's say $6,500, and that's kind of been the actuals, with the exception of 2022, and I'm going to assume it's like a couple of one-offs. So that's why we did that.
And if I can shed some light, Jared, looking at the total maintenance, every 431 account is only up $3,000 for the entire district.
And that's not what he requested. That's
No,
what
it's
we-
actually $400, because if you look at the new spending in the 431 line for vehicle, it's $3,400 all by itself. So that has been mitigated down, like we took out $2,000 when you get to the high school.
For all the maintenance?
There's $2,000 coming out.
Right. This was in the wrong spot.
$2,500 coming out of the high school in function 1420. So there's a bunch of numbers moving around. The net is $3,000 increase. So it kind of, when you look at it from a macro,
Yeah.
it's not too bad.
And again, Mr. Loring did request greater increases that we did not approve. And what we basically said was, yep, if we have circumstances, we're gonna do the repairs that we need to do. We'll overspend some of those lines, but we didn't wanna make some of the continuing increases that had been requested.
Anyone else on page 16? Okay. Moving on to 17. This is transportation.
Yeah, the transportation, and I was gonna resist doing this, but you likely know that this is hard for me. Line 443, this is a federal unfunded mandate. So the McKinney-Vento, which is the federal homeless law, has certain transportation reimbursement requirements that are in law, and there's no, it's an unfunded mandate. Local property tax mandatory increase.
And Scott,
New
can you
Hampshire
look?
legislature imposed.
This one's feds.
Okay,
So
federal.
This would be our
And-
federal delegation.
Interestingly enough, I just got a purchase order today to allocate money to the homeless transportation student account, so, for what that's worth.
Should the note amount be the whole 37,056 rather than
Yep.
the previous year?
Yep.
Okay.
Damn you, Dan.
No,
Catch,
it's just a
Dan.
number.
I tried so hard this year, but
And they're tiny numbers, too.
Yeah.
I'm using my bifocals on
Yeah,
that.
they're hard to see.
I'm just gonna
Right.
take the number out altogether.
Is everybody good on page 17? We'll move to 18. So this is getting into Bartlett.
Yeah, so we're ending the location 000.
Yeah.
And we'll be moving into 101, which is Bartlett.
Okay.
So as you go through Bartlett, you're gonna see there's additions and subtractions, and it's,
Right.
So as is typical, there's some slight increases, slight decreases based on historical actuals. Line 504, recorders for fourth graders. Apologize to their parents now.
So that's page 19. Hmm. Anybody on 19? Okay, we can move on to 20. All right, we can move to 21. If everybody's good, 21, we can go to page 22, and we're still in Bartlett. page 23.
So if I could, on 23, I just wanted to highlight lines 604. This would be health/nurse supplies, and also 608. So we've been able to kind of subsidize nursing supplies to a certain degree. We were getting like masks and gloves and all that from, free. That's drying up for one, and then the cost of what we typically buy is just kind of skyrocketed. And then we do have an older AED, and that just needs to get replaced, so.
And years ago, we never had to pay for AEDs. There was always state grant money. We never had to do that years ago. We almost always were able to get grant money, and that has no more grant money for that purpose. I think it was in the beginning, you figure like 15, 16, 17 years ago, there weren't AEDs in all schools. So the state really pushed to make sure that we had AEDs in schools, that we were tracking the life, sort of the lifetime replacement cycle of those, making sure that we had the batteries, et cetera. You have to replace the pads every year. And they've come down a lot. They used to be much more expensive than they are now, like a lot.
All right, moving on to page 24. Page 20, oh, go ahead.
Just the increase in the paraprofessional salaries.
What
Was
number?
that a planning period?
So this is for line
31.
631, so that's part of the contract, correct?
Correct.
Same question, if this was approved by the legislative body, why is it considered a new?
Because we did it earlier. We did it earlier. So this is in our current 4-year teacher agreement. We had it slated out a couple of years from now, and we felt that it was important to provide the elementary teachers with that additional planning block. That's why we did it early. And if we would have waited until the year that it was in the contract, it would have been part of default. It wouldn't have been new spending.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you'll see a similar corresponding cost at Maple Ave. And again, we think that's well worth it.
All right, moving to page 25.
Line 652, I just want to say it, Brain Pop. Brain Pop Junior.
It's a real thing.
I know, I just
It's a
want to
real
say
thing.
it. I know.
Teachers love it.
This is
Brain
not
Pop
the
and
first
Brain
year
Pop
we've seen it. It's nice to hear.
Yes.
How about Pebble? You like that one?
No, not really.
No, it's Pebble Go. It's not just Pebble.
Pebble Go.
Pebble Go.
Can we call it
And
People Go?
I tell you, it's hard to keep all these programs
Yeah.
straight, but there's a lot of them.
These aren't annual licenses
Yes,
for
they are.
these, are they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at the actual lines for the prior years, and there's a lot less.
Because we didn't have, if you recall, we put this in last year, Jared, because Maple Avenue had it, but Bartlett didn't. So we added, like, they only had one Brain Pop, and they didn't have Pebble People Go. So that was added last year. So your actuals are they will this year, they'll catch up.
Just, some of them do look at actuals for
Yep, yep.
years out, and we have to be prepared
Yep.
for that. Thank you.
All right, moving on to page 26. nice to see the foster grandparent lunches are still happening.
Yeah, and the foster grandparent program does continue. That is a program we only do at Bartlett.
Mm-hmm. Is there a reason why?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have an answer for that. We've never had a request for any other school, and this has been ongoing for,
The SAU.
well, a couple of decades anyhow. I mean, this has been a long time.
We have one at the SAU. Gary Geralman stopped by today.
Oh. I love Mr. Geralman.
Looking at line 683, specifically 684, the postage machine rental, we still send out mail.
Of course.
Less and less, but we do.
Yeah, we've been kind of cutting that line pretty good. Then the postage goes up, but yeah, we do, unfortunately.
But we're, particularly with moving to things like online registrations, we're doing less and less.
Panda doc.
Yep, less and less
Right.
snail mail.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I think that would be one, if you looked back at historicals, you'll see it just continuing to go down.
Well, it looks like this was moved from another line item from a couple years ago, because I don't see an actual
What happened was, I think
in 2020.
they had
the
it separated
meters-
with, well, no, they had it separated between special ed and regular ed, and I think now it's all into one, so.
Yeah, for the meter cost.
All right, moving to page 27. All maintenance stuff.
I know this is going to come up, the dues and fees.
What number?
I'm trying to cross-coordinate here.
Oh, I
Uh,
think you're on 26.
Yep,
yeah,
697,
26.
698, and 699.
Yeah, so that's for the New Hampshire Association of School Principals.
And they regularly attend these, or?
Yeah, they send out materials, they send out professional development information. There's a listserv that principals get information.
And the question, I guess, would be, is they're actively being assimilated into the job that they're doing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That's
it's-
one question that's come
And
up
it's
many
New Hampshire,
times.
it's all New Hampshire specific, so this is what the principals are actually dealing with.
Great, thank you.
Now, Jared, I can't speak for Principals Association, I can only speak for mine. It's like, I'd be lost without it, so.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but-
$1,000 a year for that membership for our whole SAU is dollars really well spent.
It's just, I know that I've had intense conversations about professional dues and fees and why the school's paying them versus they're not coming out of the individual's pocket. And I've always said, in the business world, the company usually picks up those dues and fees as well. So, that's just, I want to make sure that we're articulating that we are matching actually what the industry does.
Right, and if this board wants to go a different route, she's gonna have to let the superintendent and Kate know, because then we would have to include that in their compensation.
I don't think this board does.
Okay.
All right, so if we're good with 27, we can move on to 28. This is repairs, utilities. And then page 29 finishes up Bartlett with the last line being Maple Avenue. If everybody's good with Bartlett, we can move on to Maple, page 30.
So I just want to, if I could, highlight line number 806, Laptop Lease. So when we were able to secure that $400 per device grant, just again, wanted to let the public know that we were able to secure a lot more laptops and still stay within budget. If we didn't get that grant, that line would be probably going up like 20%. So, you know, I think we have to highlight when we do get these grants, what impact that has, and it has an impact on that line as well as others. We'll see laptop lease grants, so we're able to get more devices and keep our IT spend for laptops flat.
Right, which is good. All right, moving on to page 31. We can move on to page 32. A lot of this is salaries and benefits. Page 33. Page 34.
Can you look at 904, Scott, for a moment? In the everyday speech price increase of $385, but the note amount is only $400. That makes me think it used to be $15. And I don't think that's
I'm just going to get rid
accurate.
of the note amount, that's all.
I don't understand yet.
The price went up $385 according to Suzanne.
Yeah.
But the amount is inaccurate, so I'll just change that.
Okay.
I'll just either change it to $385 or just delete it. I tend to get rid of those note amounts because.
Got it. That's what I was looking for.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. All right, page 35. Again, this is salaries and some supplies and equipment.
Well, 35, you want to note, 942, that's your lunch monitors.
Yep.
And then line 950 on the following page, that's your,
Yep, 36.
on page 36, right?
Yep.
So line 950, that's your paraprofessional line for the planning period, having a class.
And again, this is just moving up the contract
Yeah.
items in the earlier fiscal year.
Yes.
Yes, Jenny?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Just moving back a little bit. Maple
number?
Ave, general supplies.
What's your reference number?
Let me see,
Look to
it
the
was 875.
875?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So that's page 33.
It's 200 for general supplies. And then I noticed that the Maple Ave special ed supplies are like general supplies are 385. Are the general supplies like crayons and all of those kinds of things, Is that enough for like the whole school of general supplies along that sort?
So those.
It seems like a low amount to me.
Yeah, those lines specifically are special ed lines. So there's also regular ed lines that have kind of a general per student amount, but this would be just the increase that the special ed department asked for. So
Right.
I can't actually say what the increase was for, but that's.
It's consistent with the actuals. I don't micromanage them in terms of, like, I see their purchase orders and everything like that, but it's typically for crayons, scissors,
Okay.
markers.
Any consumable.
Anything consumable, yeah,
Yep.
so.
And that covers the amount that they need?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think you all know that, the district has, we spend our supply lines. It's not uncommon for a teacher to give out lists and say, okay, make sure you have this book or that.
Okay.
That's also common in, not only in our schools, but every school.
Okay,
But yeah, that's what Mrs. Johnson asked for.
Okay.
And her oversight is excellent.
Okay, moving on to page 37. Some more insurance and salaries and some new equipment.
Just, if we can move backwards for a moment.
Yeah.
And go to line 950.
Okay, 36.
Again, I know we're talking about paraprofessionals, I know why we do the increase. One of the questions is, are these repurposing current paraprofessionals, or are these trying to get additional paraprofessionals?
This
to
was
cover that-
additional.
Yeah.
To cover that extra planning period?
Yep. So this was additional because they were new positions. Right. Arguably, we have vacancies. I could have moved somebody and not put it in as new, but, again, we really strive to be as transparent as we can. If it's a new expense, we put it in.
Thank you.
You good, Jared, or you're still?
I'm trying to think about this. So, I understand what we're doing in reality, because we can't fill our paraprofessionals. But if we had, as Ginny would say, if we had all of our paraprofessional positions filled, would this be actually hiring additional individuals?
Yes.
It would be.
It would be.
Even though that we haven't had to do that because.
Yeah, and in fact, this particular line is an existing person more time.
Okay.
So this allowed us to have the library open every period throughout the day and still have our library media specialist teaching classes. What the other alternative, so that $14,000, $14,100, if that was cut or was removed or the board didn't support, we would close the library for parts of the day. So that would mean teachers couldn't come in, kids couldn't come in and get books, et cetera.
so it's the same person, just extending their hours?
Right.
But in reality, we don't actually, today, we don't have to, because we don't have enough paraprofessionals working right now. we're
Because
able
we
to
have
cover that
vacancies.
through budget transfers.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, if we had the ability, we would fill every one of those para positions. We'd fill them all.
And you're still trying to.
We're still trying to.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are you good for now?
Yeah, I'm just
I know, I can see your gears moving.
thinking of the next ones.
Right.
Yeah, and Jared, you're very good at anticipating what some of those things are. So if you ever, you need like a little more detail on any one of these, just.
I think it makes sense. It's just, I know that some members might have a hard time again, thinking of the theoretical, what we want to do, that's what a budget is, it's a forecast versus
Right.
what we have to do today to make sure the schools stay open.
Right.
And we don't want to always be in that firefighting mode that we've been in for years and years because we can't hire all the paraprofessionals we need. And some people just like, well, that's not what happens today, so why aren't you doing the budget line item transfer?
Right.
From one line to another. So that's what I'm
And
trying
again,
to
we're
think.
forecasting out, a year to 18 months, and we would hope that we're going to be able to fill these positions. We might
Right.
not be able to, but we're going to do our best.
Right. All right, so that was page 36. We did 37. If everybody's good with 37, we can move on to 38.
What's the field trip that we go on? Line 1019.
So they typically do one per grade level, and they change year to year. And I've encouraged, get back out there, take kids on field trips. These
No, they
poor
do an
kids have-
apple picking one.
Yeah,
right?
they're doing a lot of them. You know, these poor kids haven't been anywhere.
I know.
Yep.
They're so important.
They really are.
learn all kinds of things on field trips.
All right, moving on to page 39, if we're good. This is maintenance and repairs, utilities. You got one there, Jared?
Yeah, well, it's electricity. I don't know what page it's on. I think it's on the next page, on 40.
Yep, we can move on to 40.
Just looking, I know that we've increased our
1070.
electricity,
Yep,
1070,
Yeah.
by a significant amount, which is good, but it still looks like it's barely covering our actuals for the prior years with that increase, especially with the rate hike that we're supposed to anticipate.
I'm just trying to keep this thing palatable for us, so my thought was I was gonna look at electricity. You'll see in other schools I did, like Glen Lake, I had an increase here.
You still increased it, don't get
Yeah.
me wrong, but
Yeah.
it's hitting our actuals of the past years, knowing that that was a lower rate than we'd be paying.
So, I don't know if this is gonna happen, but what I'm hoping is that I'm hoping we're gonna save money on propane because we have better windows, and I'll see a decrease there that will offset my increased electricity. So that's what I'm praying for.
okay.
This is the first I'm hearing of this, and I like the direction that Mr. Gross
No, we
went
have
with this.
much more energy efficient
Yeah.
windows.
Yeah,
So.
You tell that to the budget
Yeah.
committee.
I
Right.
would have, you're right, it warrants a bigger increase, but like I said, I'm hoping one will offset the other, but if I go over, so.
And again, we're fiscally conservative. We want to minimize the increases as much as we can because obviously we try to maintain the budget and we're anticipating a support staff agreement warrant article, and that's our priority.
right. All right, so going to page 41, we finish up Maple and start with Glen Lake. All right, we can move on to page 42 of Glen Lake. This is equipment and supplies.
Line 1115,
Mm-hmm.
specifically the iPad leases, are those for the faculty or are those for the students?
Students.
For students.
Yep.
All right, moving on to page 43. This is salaries, some equipment. page 44.
Brian, can you explain 1166? What is child find?
Child find is a process that we're required to conduct for any students aged 3 to 21 who might have an educational disability. So it's actually child find because we're supposed to go out and find any child who might have an educational disability and would qualify for special ed services. So for Glen Lake, this starts at age 2. So we are required to have we're required to do testing, evaluation, eligibility determination, and have an IEP written before a child turns age 3. And that is a very labor-intensive process that includes home visits, that includes meeting students who receive early interventions and supports from our local area agencies. And I would say one of the things that I think Glen Lake does a fantastic job with is it can't be rushed. You're talking about the first time parents are ever having conversations with educational people, talking about that your child has some special education needs, and that takes a lot of high-touch support that we want our parents to feel like they have very good customer service. But what is child find? It's our responsibility, and that's part of the federal Individuals with Disabilities Education Act law, that we have to go out and find them.
And that particular cost we're looking at is only mileage reimbursement.
Right.
What I'm hearing is a lot higher cost for the personnel involved.
The personnel, the meetings, the testing, yes, that's part of what Child Find as a bigger entity is really all of your costs associated with your special ed teachers, because they're the ones doing that Child Find responsibility.
But the important part of that, Dan, is the earlier you catch those problems, the quicker that they're taken care of generally, like the speech problems and those kinds of things. Oftentimes, if you stop them well before it gets to be a habit, it stops it and they discontinue the service. So a lot of those things, the kids, the earlier they're found and the earlier the problems are dealt with, the less later on special education is probably needed in some cases. So it's hugely important, the child find part of it.
I would 100% agree with Mrs. McKinnon, and I would further add that there's a cost avoidance that we've actually talked about, that every dollar you put into prevention pays dividends down the road.
Huge.
Yep, I would agree.
And I think the point I was trying to bring around is anybody looking at that and only seeing it once for $444.
You would think that's all of it.
You'd think that's all of it, and that doesn't even cut anything. It's much more expensive than that.
Yeah, and I think actually, if that phrase "child find" is confusing to people, really it's just mileage reimbursement. And so why they're getting reimbursement, whether it's because they're visiting a preschool or
Child find never stops.
It never stops, and it's rolling enrollment. So one of the things that Mrs. Stoyle talks about is it's often challenging for Glen Lake to budget and predict some of these things because kids show up all the time. And usually, we have good relationships with Easter Seals, which is the vendor that provides early interventions and supports, which go until children are 3 years old. When they become 3, they're eligible now for school district services. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into all of the preschool requirements.
All right, so if we're good with 44, we can move on to page 45. Which is more salaries and supplies, nursing supplies. All right, we can move on to page 46.
Nope, you are halfway through the pages.
Yes.
Scott, I wonder if on page 46, reference line 1224, the .4 speech is some internal shuffling between buildings. That's not a new position.
Okay.
I just wonder if,
Okay, I'll take that now.
I just don't want
Yep.
anyone to think that we're slipping in a speech path that we didn't previously
That was
identify.
a note error. I tried to take those news out where they didn't belong, but I missed a couple.
All right, so moving on to page 47. More salaries, benefits. Yeah, go ahead.
Looking at line 1253, I know that we didn't talk about this earlier, but what is our thought process for administrative increases for our principals and our other leaders? Is this to stay comparable with what we have for the unions, or, I know this question is going to come up.
Yeah, so typically what we're shooting for, remember for our administrators, there's a separate salary pool increase line. And because our administrators, as well as the SSS group, are not voted on by the general public, any salary increases have to be added. You're familiar with how we do it. So even the money that we gave folks for this year, we have to add in. So that sometimes gets a little confusing.
And that's what you have in the new column, is what they've already got.
Right,
So-
the new is what they've already got.
So, okay, so if we're looking at the budget for the principal, that's what we've already approved, and we just
Yes.
have to add in the new column because we've approved it for this fiscal year, and it needs to be approved as part of the
Your
budget.
salary pool is just redistributed. That's how
But this isn't a pool.
No,
this is for a
it was
specific person.
last year's
But there's
salary
also the pool.
Yeah.
Last year's salary
Right.
pool gets distributed to the new column.
Right.
So specifically, if we're talking about principals and assistant principals, which are their own line items.
And in general, we're shooting for the 50th percentile.
Okay, so
That's
this is to bring them in line with.
That's usually what we're.
Reasonable and customary
Yeah.
with the surrounding
Yeah,
area.
and so you'll see that the collective bargaining increases are often different than what administrators are getting. And so the same would hold there. And just to be clear, the administrative salary increases are less. I didn't want anyone to think it was more.
So is the salary pool, where is the salary pool? I can answer my own question by looking at it. For, let's just say here, because, let me
Should be
hear,
in the
here's my
district.
theory. My
District.
theory is, the salary pool should be in the new column, and because the salary pool from the prior year was budgeted, and if you're redistributing that,
Yeah.
so you've already had that conversation, that should be in
I,
the base.
yeah, I have that conversation with Kate every year. Yeah.
Okay,
You wanna
and
have
so
a-
who didn't win
I'll call
this
you
year?
tomorrow and we'll have it tomorrow.
Three-way conversation.
Yeah, well, I'll call you.
Okay,
We'll have it again.
yeah, and so we're.
You can do it either way.
No, you can't.
I,
Because if they go ahead and we look at the new and say, no, we're not doing new, but we've already done it, so it's not new.
arguably,
Yeah, go ahead.
my conversation with Kate was that I could argue that the salary increases should be in the default and the salary pool is in new. And Kate does it the other way around. The salary pool is part of the defaults, and then
Okay, let's think about
Well,
it this way.
But the reason it's part of the default was because it was part of the previous year's budget.
Except we took that money and we moved it around, I can understand that. If the voters say, no way, default budget, those principals have to take a pay cut. Everybody in that new column takes a pay cut unless this board approves moving money from someplace else and put it in. Procedural wise.
correct.
Okay, as long as we're on the same page on
Yes.
that one.
If there was a default budget, this board would have to take action to find, to move, reduce someplace else to fund that.
And I bet you know where we could go? The default budget pool line. It's a round thing. It's
Yeah,
just, it's a process, but it's a discussion that Jared might have at some point in time.
And I think the bigger contextual thing that I would share is, we're very conservative about how we create the default budget. So there are things that we've talked about. We could make an argument, and a lot of school districts build energy increases into default. We don't do that.
Well, that's not lawful, and we've talked about that
Well,
before.
they're doing it all over this state.
They are doing unlawful things all over the state, yes they are.
Well,
All right, so are we good with page 47?
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome. Moving on to page 48.
It's okay, there's another one coming up in the next.
I'm sure.
Well, I have a feeling that we're going to probably stop after this school.
Yeah,
we do have non-public tonight.
we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured we had one more.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to page 49.
So on that one, I just want to remind everybody that on line 1302, we did have a one-time expense. That was the cistern inspection, which I removed from the default,
Well, it's not even in the base.
right, from the base. Right. There's not a ton of those one-timers this year, just so you know.
All right, moving on to page 50.
So you've got the energy increase here, Scott.
Oh, yeah.
That's primarily for the new
Yeah.
classrooms.
Yeah, those modulars are exclusively electricity, and they are, and that, the other thing too is we've got, they're in the summer, they're being used for air conditioning.
Right.
So I was way off on this one.
And I swear, this is going to be the third year in a row somebody's going to talk about a heat pump, and I'm just going to throw up my hands about it. Because somebody always brings it up at the budget committee that will save money in the long run if we put in heat pumps.
Yeah, and the system we have is heat pump-ish.
Yeah.
Ish.
They are electric systems. They're kind of more in the VRF, the variable refrigeration type model. So they're similar.
Yeah.
It's not the same as like a Mitsubishi mini split that you would have in a residential application.
All right, so finishing up page 50, and the very top of 51 is the rest of Glen Lake. And then there's just Mountain View and the high school.
Mr. Chair, I didn't see it in the other ones, but I know that we're keeping $1 in the architecture lines, just in case if we have to do
Yeah.
something. Are we putting that in other schools as well?
Not always, as long as I've got it somewhere,
In the function.
in the function at some, at
Okay.
one school, then
Then we can use
I'm
it.
pretty good, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't see it anywhere else. That's why
Yeah,
I
no,
asked.
that's fine.
Yeah, they look at that the MS 25, 22, I think, and as long as there's $1 in every function line, then you're good to go.
So, if everybody's good with Glen Lake, we do have some non-public. So Wednesday,
We'll start here.
we'll start at 6. We were talking about having the high school food service, the food lunch presentation. Is that going to happen Wednesday? I know we
Oh.
talked about it.
So for
Frank.
outstanding high school, Mrs. Moran, when were we thinking we were going to do the high school presentation on the change of the lunch?
It all depends on.
Okay. I don't want to speak for Mr. McBride, but
Okay.
I would imagine that either Mr. McBride or Mrs. McCann would be available. If they are, we could include that on Wednesday.
That and the class.
Yep. So
Because
we still
Monday.
have the one AP class for the human geography.
Right, so I thought that those two would be small, and then we can finish the middle school and
pick
high
it.
school. And then Monday night is your presentation with the facilities, and then we do have some other stuff on Monday, right? So we're trying not to make one night top-heavy.
Right, and I think the other thing, Scott, were we gonna talk at all about, like, capital reserve fund deposits, other warrant articles? I mean, certainly the negotiations are still ongoing, but if we
Yeah.
wanted to have any kind of talks about, capital reserve fund deposits, for the
Right.
board to think about an amount.
Okay.
And you originally wanted Monday to be where we would approve the budget? Is
Yeah,
that
so
what you
that-
need?
Yeah, this
Okay.
way, if you do that, then it allows me to then build New Boston's tuition rate, and, I can get it over to the budget committee, so.
It allows us to update all the
Yeah.
Okay,
accounts.
all right. So is everybody good with that plan?
Next Monday, are we starting at 6 or 7?
6.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is it 6?
yeah. We were just keeping everything in October for 6,
Yeah.
not to confuse, and making sure that you had plenty of time with your committee to.
We have plenty of time.
Yes, yes, I know, you have a large group coming in.
So we
for
have,
that.
so we have Wednesday, then Monday?
Yes. Yep, at 6 o'clock. All right, so,
So what's give me a tip on that food service change thing. What is?
So, Mr. Right now, we currently have 2 lunch
Oh,
periods.
you're talking about the 2 lunch
Yeah,
for the
this
one
this
lunch
is the two lunch
yeah,
periods versus the
I misspoke
one.
by saying food service.
Yeah, I
but
remember
it's
that. I
lunch.
thought it
Yeah.
was something about actual food.
No, it's lunchtime stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so
You know, a
hopefully we
live
can.
demo would have been good.
And then
right?
Yeah.
the other AP class that we hope to be able to bring back Wednesday and move that.
Yep.
So other business that may legally come before the meeting, I just want to remind everyone, Mrs. Moran sent out the superintendent evaluation to you guys. A few weeks ago, I have received some of them. If you can email or hand them to me Wednesday, because we're trying to we still have to then discuss stuff non-public, I'm hoping November, December, so that we're ahead of the game here. All right, is there any other business? All right, so what are we going under?
A.
A. All right, so I need a motion to go into non-public under RSA 91A 32A, the dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee, or the disciplining of such employee, or the investigation of any charges against him or her, unless the employee affected, 1, has a right to a meeting, and 2, requests that the meeting be open, in which case the request shall be granted.
So moved.
By Shane, do I have a second?
Second.
By Caroline, sorry, Dan. I saw her hand. All right, I'll do roll call. Retta?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes?
Jared?
Yes.
Caroline? Shane? Yes. Dan?
Yeah.
Heather? Yes, so we're non-public, so we're gonna go in the conference
Yep.
room.